Smith, touchdown, Alabama!
Intercepted by Charles Woodson! Collins off the Heisman!
They will not catch Lamar Jackson!
35-40, he's on his way! Desmond Howard is going all the way! That is a Heisman Trophy winner!
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Hello Heisman from the Varsity Podcast Network, where we talk all things college football and, of course, the Heisman race. J-Ro, what's up, my man? How was your weekend?
You know what? I guess the normal thing for me to do would be to say, yeah, mine was fine. How was yours? But I know the answer to how your weekend was. Man, I'll tell you what was almost as entertaining as that Michigan-Ohio State game was Desmond Howard's Instagram page. If you haven't seen it, you got to go see it, man. This is what somebody looks like when they're really, really happy.
Man, I tell you what, J-Ro, you hit it on the head with that one. You know, just set aside the game and everything that was tied into the game and the 30th anniversary of the pose. But the fact that I had one of my twin sons with me, I call him Big Twin, my son Demir, was with me for the whole ride to experience that whole thing with my son. Man, it's just something that, it's something he'll never forget. And it made it that much more special. I told him, I said, you know who's really, really happy right now, who's ecstatic? He said, who? I said, Papa. That's what he calls my dad, Papa. I said, Papa, not because of what happened in the game, but because you're here to experience every minute of this with your dad. I said, Papa is like beside himself right now with joy. So you're right. It was a very special, just a tremendous weekend. J-Ro, I'm still floating, man. I'm still floating.
I love it. And all I could think of looking at all the posts that you had was, what must it be like, let's be real here. What must it be like to be you to go to Ann Arbor for that game? I mean, you're like Paul McCartney going back to Liverpool.
Yeah, man, I tell you, just the atmosphere, the anticipation, the build up. I mean, it was a monumental, I guess, win for the football team, but just for the school, the community. It's people. There are people who didn't have a dog in the fight, J-Ro. Like, they didn't go to Michigan.
Like
they
me.
Didn't go to exactly. They didn't go to Ohio State. But they respect the rivalry, and they just love to see those two teams play. And then the outcome being what it was, a decisive victory for Michigan too. Yeah, people, they can get on board with that. They really can.
Yeah. Well, listen, it was such a consequential game for me. I don't have a dog in the fight because both Michigan and Ohio State kicked Maryland's ass this year. So, I'm right down the middle on that. All right. Gotcha. So speaking of Liverpool and Paul McCartney, let's do the music thing real quickly because there's so much to talk about this week. I just want you to know my vinyl this week is the Beatles. And you know what that is? I couldn't find the Let It Be album. But if you haven't seen this Get Back documentary, it's crazy. I mean, it is just the craziest thing. This happened so many years ago, and, this has never been seen before. And you're right there watching something so historic happen. I mean, it's just amazing to me. So I got the Beatles today.
I can't wait. I'm going to watch it. I got Maze, Frankie Beverly and Maze.
Oh, nice.
My song is Happy Feelings on this album.
All right.
Happy Feelings. Yeah. So Frankie Beverly featuring, Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, which is one of my favorite groups.
All right. So gigantic week in college football. We're going to get to the Lincoln Riley thing a little bit later. Pat Forty, the senior writer from Sports Illustrated, we had a chance to talk to him about the transfer portal. We were mostly talking about players, and about the playoffs. But, the big news this week, Lincoln Riley. But as far as the Heisman is concerned, we're now a week to go until the votes are in. And I don't know about you, but it just feels to me like it's still a jump ball. And I'm thinking back to like 12 years ago, 2009, when Mark Ingram won. And I don't know if people remember Mark Ingram, running back from Alabama. It was the closest race ever in Heisman history. He beat Toby Gerhart, who was running back from Stanford, by 28 points. And the way I look at it, I think that the way this is all going to work out, when the Heisman is finally decided, whoever shines the brightest, on conference championship weekend is
Yes.
going to be the guy who's going to win it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I really, I think that you're right on point with that. It's wide open. It's still wide open. People, they were looking for a quarterback. They were looking for a Bryce Young. They were looking for a CJ Stroud. But CJ Stroud on the road, biggest rivalry against Michigan, played okay. Nothing special. Yeah, nothing special, though. Nothing special. He didn't, if Bryce was ahead of him, he didn't gain any ground. Bryce Young, Bryce didn't play great, but when they needed him to deliver, he delivered for Alabama. Then they ended up winning the game against Auburn, the Iron Bowl, in 4 overtimes. But like you said, conference championship Saturday just might be the deciding factor in this Heisman race, because he's going up against Georgia in the SEC championship game. Another dark horse, Aidan Hutchinson. Aidan, you look for a model of consistency when you're looking for a Heisman Trophy winner. And actually, I always feel as though you shouldn't look for it. Like, the guy should jump out at you, and Aidan jumps out at you. And from the first game to the last regular season game, he's been extremely consistent. He's like top 5 draft pick on Mel Kiper's big board. I think 3 sacks in the huge game, against Ohio State, CJ Stroud and that offense. And now he's going to have an opportunity against Iowa in the Big Ten championship game now to show what he has again. So you got a couple of guys who are playing who can show their stuff. And I also think that Hassan Haskins from Michigan, just because of his consistency, and I said Saturday too, put it on an Instagram post and on Twitter, that don't forget when Kenneth Walker III had 5 touchdowns, and it was an open race. We're like, okay, that's probably one of the most dominating performances in a big game that we've seen, where it doesn't get any bigger in the regular season than Michigan, Ohio State, the game, and Hassan Haskins had 5 touchdowns against the number 2 team in the country. So I just thought that there were like some parallels there from what Kenneth Walker III had done against Michigan when that was a big game up in East Lansing. And then obviously the big game in Ann Arbor, Hassan Haskins and that offensive line, it was just ground and pound. They took over and he had 5 touchdowns. So.
All right. So we're talking, of course, about who's still in it. This is our performance watch. You mentioned Haskins. Let's break each one of these possibilities down. Let's start with Haskins.
They give it to Haskins. He's around right end. There's room. He's at the 10. Breaks it at the 5. Fights his way into the end. Yes! Touchdown, Michigan! Hassan Haskins from 13 yards, and the Wolverines extend their lead.
I know you love him. You mentioned the 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He's got 103 yards a game. And the fact of the matter is, I know we've tried to stay away from numbers this year, but that doesn't even put him in the top 15 in the country. Here's my opinion on this. I think that what Hassan Haskins did this past weekend, having a great game against a defense which isn't so great, but still a highly ranked team, I think what he did was he put himself in the discussion for this coming weekend. It's basically sudden death. Whoever steps up this weekend is going to be the one to win it.
Right. Yeah. And you look at Hassan's numbers, and Hassan, obviously, especially like, I guess, maybe the first half of the season, maybe the first 8 games. I forget when Blake Corum got that high ankle sprain, but he shared the backfield with Blake Corum. They were thunder and lightning, but he was the starting running back, but he shared carries. So, and it worked for Michigan. So he's not going to have the numbers that a lot of these other guys may have had, but that's okay. People talk about, we had this many yards against, I don't know, Rutgers. I'm like, well, Kenneth Walker had at least 4 games where he gained, less than 100 yards, and he was the featured back for Michigan State. So I understand what you're saying. I get it, but I always tell people it's not just what you do, it's who you do it against. Mm-hmm. And this Ohio State defense was a defense that, according to a lot of analysts, was improving. They were playing better. They were great. This team had turned the corner defensively. They weren't having the issues. This is the same defense that pretty much shut Kenneth Walker III down the previous week. It's the same defense, So I'm just saying.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways. You're right. And just for a point of emphasis, Hassan Haskins with 6 games this year with more than 100 yards, 6 games this year with less than 100 yards. All right, you mentioned Bryce Young.
Now for the 2-point conversion to win it for Alabama. Bryce in the shotgun. Gets the snap. Backpedals. Looks left. Throws. Touchdown. 2-point conversion. And Alabama wins. John Mechie on the grab.
You know, it looked like he might have taken himself out of the Heisman discussion in the game, the Iron Bowl against Auburn, for the majority of the game. And then we got down to that last drive, and it was stunning. I'm going to tell you what. 97 yards, 92 seconds, converts twice on 3rd and 10, once on 4th and 7. And I'll tell you what, that pass to Ja'Cory Brooks, who was replacing Jamison Williams, that was a thing of beauty. I mean, and the poise that this young man showed, I'll tell you what, I thought it was really impressive.
Well, what he has in his favor going for him right now is he has another game to play. Wasn't a great performance, but when they needed him the most, he delivered in a big way. Some analysts like to say it was a Heisman moment. I mean, if you're looking for that moment, that may have been a moment for him. Not sure it's the Heisman moment, but it was a hell of a drive. He showed poise. He showed he has like ice water in his veins. He's a cool customer and with pinpoint accuracy. So he has this game against Georgia now coming up in the SEC championship game where he can really start to separate himself. Like I said, they wanted to position CJ Stroud, Ohio State's quarterback, against Alabama's quarterback, Bryce Young. CJ Stroud's done. And he might be done because the guy who really should be getting a lot of votes now, Aidan Hutchinson, made sure that his season ended last Saturday. Regular season is a wrap. You're not going to play in a conference championship. And Aidan Hutchinson, who's been a consistent performer the whole year long, had another monster game against Ohio State. And like I said, I repeat it, it's not just who you do it against. It's not just what you do, it's who you do it against. And on the biggest stage, Aidan Hutchinson delivered in a big way.
Well, I'll tell you what, in a year when there's really no clear favorite, maybe this is the year when a guy who is exclusively a defensive player could end up, winning the award. We'll have to see.
How about this? J-Ro, look at this. Okay, so the top 2 coming into last week's game was probably, if you look at Vegas, CJ Stroud, the quarterback at Ohio State, and Bryce Young, the quarterback at Georgia, right? And then number 3 gets a little hazy, gets a little foggy, right? You may toss in there Kenny Pickett, you may toss whoever, okay. Maybe Matt Corral, but it wasn't a strong position 3. Now you have Aidan Hutchinson.
Stroud gets the ball, back to throw, looks, he's getting hit, pressured, sack time! The Wolverines with Aidan Hutchinson gets Stroud back at the 14-yard line. They'll be forced to kick it away.
Let's just say he's at number 3. CJ Stroud isn't playing no more. His season's done because of Michigan and Aidan Hutchinson. So he's done. It's a wrap. He can't gain any points this week. But then you have Bryce Young, who may be in pole position. And now he's about to play against the best defense in the FBS, the Georgia Bulldogs. So let's just say he doesn't have a good game. I mean, now you're looking at Aidan Hutchinson as the guy who would, in my opinion, move into the pole position as the odds-on favorite or as the front runner.
Interesting. Again, point of information here, Bryce Young now 40 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. But as you say, let's see what he can do against Georgia.
All right, top defense in the country.
Yeah. All right. So one other name, we've mentioned him all year long, and he is certainly still in the discussion. Kenny Pickett, the quarterback from Pitt. They will play in the ACC championship game against Wake Forest. Pitt, just again, for the sake of information, 40 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. But I think there's going to be a footnote here because, Pickett against Wake Forest, first of all, you're not going to see a lot of defense in this game, and you're certainly not going to see an awful lot of defense from Wake Forest. They've struggled on that side of the ball all year long. So it may skew things, and for people who don't watch that closely, this weekend, big spot, conference championship, he could put up some big numbers.
He could. And against this defense, a very porous defense for Wake Forest, he should put up big numbers. It just might be a shootout. This just might be, it may come down to like last season, I remember Florida played Alabama, and it was just like a shootout. Like they were just going up and down the field on each other like a track meet. You just figured out, okay, whichever team has the ball last is going to win this game. This could be just like that game because obviously with Sam Hartman at the quarterback position for Wake Forest, they still have a pretty strong offense. And I do think that Narduzzi's defense, though, for Pitt will probably get a couple of stops. I mean, they're going to be a physical bunch. They're going to be well coached, and I'm sure they're going to get a bunch of stops. But this has the potential to be a shootout, and Kenny Pickett, could potentially put up some big numbers. So, yeah, you're right about that.
All right. One of my favorite parts of the pod every week, we get to throw out some of these questions. I know you love this too.
Absolutely.
And we thank everybody and remind you, if you've got questions for Des or myself, you can submit them on the Varsity Instagram page. But why don't we start with this? What's the funniest thing? One person wrote in and wants to know. What's the funniest thing that you've ever seen at the Heisman ceremony?
Well, J-Ro, I tell you what, it's a big ceremony, and some people try to dress the part. So I've seen some really outlandish outfits. I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but let me tell you, one of the funniest things I've heard is anytime there's a player up for the Heisman from Oklahoma, we get the great Billy Sims, and Billy Sims is he's such a vocal supporter of all and everything Oklahoma, that every time we have a guy that's up there for the award, out of nowhere, Billy Sims be like, Boomer! Sooner! Just out of nowhere. He's like, and we're all on stage. And then, they put the Heisman, the former winners on the stage, right? And then he's still on stage. Boomer! Sooner! Like, we get it, Billy, we get it. So that's like the funniest thing that has happened as far as vocally, because like, all right, Billy, okay, calm down. Baker's going to win it, okay? Baker Mayfield will win it. Just calm down.
So I wonder what the reaction of somebody like Earl Campbell would be to something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Earl would not be too happy with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't be bringing that boomer in here right now.
No, sir.
All right. Well, that question got me to thinking about one for you.
Okay.
So you win the award, and then you got to come back the next year as now you're part of this fraternity. Do you remember coming back as a member of the fraternity and looking around and thinking to yourself, was there a moment that wowed you, or a person that you met, an experience that you had with somebody
100%.
there that just wowed you?
100%. So growing up, I was a running back, right? And I was kind of a small running back, fast and shifty. So I used to love Tony Dorsett.
33.
TD 33. He was my favorite player ever. And I used to try to, tailor my game after his game. I used to try to do the things that TD 33 would do. So imagine this. Now, here I am at the Heisman ceremony. I come back as a former winner, and I'm in the room. It's like one of those rooms where you have like drinks and hors d'oeuvres and stuff. And there's TD 33. Jimmy, I was in awe, man. I was like a kid again. Like, that's my idol. Like, that's him. And I'm in the same room, like the fraternity room, with Tony Dorsett. Man, I tell you, I was so nervous, man. It was like I was a kid again, because I can picture all the play. Listen, J-Ro, I was with Tony Dorsett every step of the way when he ran that 99-yard touchdown
I remember
against the Minnesota Vikings on
Monday Night Football.
Yes, sir, bro. So I was blown away. I was so nervous, but that was that moment. I'm like, man, but I'm like in the same fraternity as my idol.
Yes, indeed you. Yes, indeed you were, and yes, indeed you are. All right, we have another viewer who wrote in wondering about the best rivalries in college football. So I'm taking that question out of the mix, because I think I know what you're going to say. All right,
exactly.
But how about this?
Okay.
What's the second best rivalry in college football?
Now, that's a really good question. And since I do this for a living now, I've been able to travel the country and see some of these rivalries up close and in person. And I would say, man, oh man, the Iron Bowl just might be the number two best rivalry in college football. I think that Alabama, Auburn, those two teams, those two fan bases, I mean, the tradition of toilet paper and trees and everything that they do in Auburn, man, it's and you know, you had the kick six. I mean, they've had some very, very strange, endings to some of these games, especially since I've been covering college football. And when you think that Alabama's like this unbeatable team, that it's just unstoppable force, Auburn finds a way, like against all odds. So I think I would say the Iron Bowl would be number two to the game, which is Michigan, Ohio State.
Well, you don't need to look any further than this past weekend. You've got Alabama, one of the best teams in the country, okay?
Yeah.
And they're playing against a team by the record, Auburn, which is mediocre, and they don't have their starting quarterback, and the quarterback who is playing for them is injured. And yet it goes right down to 4 overtimes. Really,
exactly.
It never ceases.
The first time in the history.
Yeah, never ceases to entertain, does it?
Yep. No, it does not.
All right. Well, listen, like I said, we've enjoyed always hearing from you guys out there. If you have any questions, we remind you, send them in on Varsity's Instagram page. That's it for this week's questions from out there.
Yeah, and that's it for this episode of Hello Heisman from the Varsity Podcast Network. This show is produced in partnership with Learfield and Blue Duck Media. I'm Desmond Howard.
And I'm Jimmy Roberts.
We'll see you.